Age of Apocalypse was delayed in the UK, but I'm finally here reviewing Magik, one of the new heroes for Marvel Champions of the card game. And I'm asking, is she the best mystic in the game now? And it's a pretty interesting discussion, and she's been really fun, so I'm excited to get into it. So Magik has the fascinating ability to play with the top card of her deck face up. This is only in hero form, so when you're Alter Ego, when you start the game, you cannot see what was on top. And if you flip down once the deck is moved on, you won't know what is on top of your deck either. But in general, Magik knows what is on top of her deck, and it's effectively the sixth card in her hand, because once per phase, she can play the top card of her deck as if it was in her hand, and what's even better is she gets a -1 cost discount on that card. So not only is it kind of an extra card in her hand, it's also kind of a heli carrier for that extra card in your hand. It's very, very strong, and if things line up so that you can play a sort of defensive card, something on the villain's turn in the villain phase, you basically get the bonus twice because you can use this once per phase, use it in the villain phase, then use it in the hero phase. Magik is a good character, guys. Doesn't always line up to work in the villain phase. It does more often if you're in protection because there's more cards to be played in the villain phase. But yeah, really, really good. So Magik is already based around playing sort of the top card of her deck, playing around with that in general, but also her upgrades and events play around with the top card of her deck, since you can see it. One example here is the Soul Sword. It's her attack sort of damage upgrade. It's a 1-cost upgrade. It's restricted. It is a weapon, and it gives her basic attacks piercing, which is pretty strong, honestly. There's a lot of tough in the game. And while the top card of your deck has a physical or wild resource icon, Magik gets +1 attack. In a similar vein, we've got Soul Strike, which is her sort of damage event. It's a 2-cost event. It has the attack and spell traits, hero attack, deal full damage to the enemy. If the top card of your deck has a physical or wild resource icon, stun the enemy. So if you have the right thing on top of your deck, Soul Sword is making you deal more damage, and Soul Strike is getting you a stun. So not only does what's on top of your deck matter in terms of you might want to play it with that reduced 1 cost in that phase, it also affects how your your upgrades are functioning or how your event cards are functioning, which is a really, really fun puzzle. And when we start to look at some of her ways to manipulate the top card of her deck, we see some really interesting sort of lines of play emerge, some really interesting sequencing, some interesting decision making. It can be a little bit complicated, and she's definitely a harder than average character to play, but she is really rewarding and really, really fun. So her Alter Ego ability kind of lets her manipulate the top of her deck here, because you can choose any spell in your discard pile, put it on the top of your deck when you flip from Alter Ego down to hero form. And this is really, really strong because a lot of her cards are spells, and she also has access to the powerful spells from the aspects such as Summoning Spell, Magic Attack. We're going to look at those a bit later on. So if one of those is in your discard pile, put it on top of your deck. Now, when you flip down, you can immediately play that from the top of your deck, which is really, really good. Or maybe you picked a spell with the right resource icon, so now an event in your hand is going to get its bonus, or one of your upgrades is now functioning and giving you a stat boost. So really, really fun kind of uses there, setting things up to play or give a stat boost or enable an event, or better yet, all free. If you can put something on top of your deck, and this goes for some of the other cards on the screen here too, or just generally finding a good one, if it can increase your stats from an upgrade and you get to use your basic attack with the Soul Sword, let's say, and get the bonus, that's great. If you get to play an event next and then you're getting the bonus, that's really good. And then if you play it from the top of your deck, that's even better. So if that all lines up, excellent. But generally, you're going to try and aim for 1 or 2 of those things, and it's very, very fun. Limbo is probably her best way to do this. So Limbo is a 1-cost support card. It's got the Dimension trait, which is new, and I don't think has any significance, but it's pretty fun. Now, the response here is after the villain phase begins, exhaust Limbo, swap a card in your hand with the top card of your deck. This is basically Domino's hero ability or Starlord's Alter Ego ability, but as a response. But the main way you'll probably be using this outside of certain turns where you find something that you can actually use in the villain phase, you'll be using the action, which is basically the same. Exhaust Limbo, swap a card in your hand with the top of your deck. And this is really powerful because any card in your hand can now be on the top of your deck, which basically means any resource icon you need can just be on the top of your deck. And that's obviously good for the reasons we've looked at, for the other cards we've looked at so far. But you can just get a discount on something you need. You can line things up. You can even put Digging Deep, which we'll look at a little bit later. It's a basic resource card from the previous expansion, which when discarded gives you a bonus. It basically comes back to your hand. Or something like White Fox, which is an ally from that same expansion. When discarded, she gets put into play. So Limbo can put those cards on top of your deck, and then they're sort of positioned for you to interact with in some fun way. So Limbo is very, very good. When Limbo is in your hand, you play Limbo. Unless you would utterly lose the game, Limbo is just the card you have to play. Then we have Stepping Disc, which is a really powerful event. A better event than I expected when we first saw it in the reveal article, but in my defense, we didn't know any of her attack, footing, or defense events. They weren't revealed yet, but in combination with them, it's very good. But even on its own, it's very, very good. One cost event, superpower trait, doesn't really matter since she doesn't have enough superpowers to run deft focus, in my opinion. But the hero action is ready your hero. For a one cost event with no side effect, no extra catch to jump through, this is still pretty good in all honesty. This is basically limitless stamina, and with Soul Sword, she can get a pretty hefty basic attack, something like that. So this is already pretty decent, but the real key thing here, the best part of this, is you get to choose a magic card in your discard pile, which isn't another copy of Stepping Disc. I think she has 3 of these bad boys, and you get to put it on top of your deck, and that's particularly powerful because, again, we've just looked at, you can enable her events that might be in your hand to enable any upgrades you've got into play, or you can set something up that you want to play. But this is especially powerful because you can basically find any of your events you want and put it there ready to play at any moment. You don't have to flip to Alter Ego and then come back down the next turn to do it. You just get the card there. So let's say a nasty side scheme has come out or the main scheme is in danger of going over and I want some threat removal. So if my falling card is in the discard pile, all I need to do is play Stepping Disc and it puts it on top of my deck ready to play. I don't have to go Alter Ego and then flip back down. I literally just play this one cost event, which is already kind of good on its own. And now I have a falling card kind of just summoned up from nowhere. So if I didn't have any falling before, now I do. I have her falling event, which is called Exorcism. We'll look at that soon. Really very strong. If you need more damage, guess what? You can just grab Soul Strike that we just looked at. You can, in fact, play Soul Strike from your hand. It goes to your discard pile. You can then play Stepping Disc if you also happen to have it in your hand. And since she's a Mystic, she can run Sorcerer Supreme. She can run Spiritual Meditation. She's going to find cards very easily. Then you Stepping Disc, ready up so you can attack again. But also, you can put Soul Strike on top of your deck, play that. You can just find whatever damage you need. It's so, so good. So then we have her defensive stuff. And Mystical Armor is her defense upgrade. I would say this is her least good upgrade, but it is also her cheapest upgrade, so it is what it is. Retaliate, it's good. I only typically play this if I've got, nothing else to do with the resources. Maybe it's on top of my deck at a convenient time when the rest of my hand works out at a nice cost. It is useful, but it's not a priority in any way unless you're playing a really sort of defense-based protection deck. Then we've got Magic Barrier and Colossus, and these are the cards you're going to use Limbo for in the villain phase to put them on top of your deck so you can use them when the villain attacks you. The Magic Barrier is a one-cost event, and when an enemy initiates an attack, you get to prevent 3 of the damage. If you've got the right card on top of your deck in terms of resource icon, you get to deal 3 damage back, very reminiscent of Nova's Force Field Projection card. This is really good. If you get to put this on top of your deck, either through being very lucky or Limbo putting it there, it's basically free, because if you weren't doing anything else with your sort of top of your deck in the villain phase, you've lost nothing. You've just gained Magic Barrier being played. Really, really good. And just playing it from the top of your deck does mean you're unlikely to have the right resource icon beneath it unless you've really built into, so let's say, energy resources. But it's still, fairly likely it does happen, and it is really, really good with or without that bonus. Then we have Colossus, her signature ally, 3 cost, 2 forwarding to attack, toughness. This is really a new version of Pip the Troll, but whereas Adam Warlock can play Pip the Troll for anybody, Colossus is only for Magic. But the reason they're similar is because their interrupt allows them to be played when an enemy is attacking. So when an enemy attacks, you can play Colossus from your hand. You've got to pay the full amount, but then he's in play and you can declare him the defender of that attack without exhausting him. What that means is you've now got Colossus in play, he's defending you, but he's not exhausted. So the enemy will hit that tough, he'll lose the tough, but he's still ready to immediately use his forwarding or attack next turn, which is incredibly strong because most tough allies you have to play them, and if you want to use that tough to block, then wait to actually use them for the villain phase. Then you have to exhaust them to become the defender. So then in the next sort of in the player phase, you cannot use them immediately. You have to wait for the next turn for you to then be able to start using their stats to finish off using, their health efficiently. So unless you've got Hanger Bay, but depends what aspect you're in, so on and so forth. Colossus is really, really good. Swap him on top of your deck. Now he's a 2-cost ally, and yeah, really, really powerful. Oh, and something I should mention is that Magic Barrier says when an enemy initiates an attack, and because it's a defense trait, these 2 things in combination, since it doesn't use the word you, means that if an enemy attacks another player at the table, you can play this to kind of pull the attack to you and defend it, which can be very, very useful. You don't have to exhaust to make that happen, nothing like that. It's very, very useful utility there. A bit of a kind of support play you can do. Looking at the last of her cards here, we have her forwarding cards. We have the threat removal sort of forwarding upgrade, Magic's Crown, and this is a 2-cost upgrade, and this gives Magic steady, and I take great pleasure in being stunned or confused when I see this in my hand, or better yet, maybe on top of my deck, and I can play this, and now I'm only half stunned or half confused, which is really, really fun, and like the other upgrades, it gives you a +1 stat bonus if you have the right thing on top of your deck. Exorcism, very much a mirror of Soul Strike, where that does 4 damage, this does 4 threat removal, where that stuns, this confuses, but confusing and, forwarding cards like this tend to be more powerful, not only because threat removal is more powerful, sort of, more expensive than damage point for point usually, but because the confuse is separate from the forwarding. When I attack with Soul Strike, I stun the enemy that I dealt the damage to. But when I play Exorcism, I don't, confuse a scheme, obviously, because, you cannot confuse a scheme. So I remove threat from the side scheme or main scheme, and then I get to confuse the villain, which is really, 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 really good. So Exorcism is a fantastic card. Then we have Scrying, a 0-cost event, and this is a 0-cost event which draws you a card. So it basically replaces itself, which means you basically play it every time you see it. This is kind of true of all 0-cost events in Marvel Champions, which draw you a card. We talked about this a little bit in the last video with Ant-Man and Resize. Scrying is a great card. So what it actually does is you get to look at the top 3 cards of your deck, draw 1, discard 1, put 1 back on top of your deck. So you get to look at 3 cards, a bit like Futurist, and you get to draw 1 of them, a bit like Futurist. And this is strong. Getting a choice of 3 cards is much better than just drawing 1 card, and you can often get the perfect solution that you need. But also putting 1 card on top of your deck means you can start to line up your upgrades or any of your events in hand or something you want to play for cheaper. So in a way, since you can play 1 card from the top of your deck every phase, if you have Scrying in hand, you can kind of almost draw 2 cards. You can look through 3 different cards, and you get to end up having 2 of them still be playable. And then you discard whatever the last one is, and if it happens to be Digging Deep or White Fox or something, great, no problem there. You're going to get the bonus. But yeah, generally this is just a fantastic card to work for your deck. It's very much kind of in the same vein as Spiritual Meditation. All in all, I think Magic's cards are fantastic. Her events are very strong. Even if you don't get the extra bonus, the status card or whatever from like Exorcism or Soul Strike, they are still pretty good, especially if played from the top of your deck. They are there kind of whenever you need them, thanks to Stepping Disc, thanks to her Ultra Ego ability if you're flipping down, thanks to Scrying finding them, thanks to Spiritual Meditation digging them out of the deck, anything like that. Very, very strong. I never really have a bad turn with Magic, like, ever, and I usually have a very, very good turn. Her upgrades, I think, are pretty good overall, especially the Soul Sword and Magic's Crown. Especially Soul Sword is the main one I go for, and I do like the Crown, though, in solo play especially, being able to boost up her 1 forwarding stat. That is her sort of a weakness. I didn't really cover her stats, but, they're pretty, straightforward. 2 attack, 2 defense, 1 threat removal. It's not the best stat line because, obviously, threat removal is very important, but definitely her cards and her sort of abilities make up for that. So yeah, really, really fun hero kit that I really enjoy. And the ability to try and, line up those upgrades, events, and also something you want to play, and the kind of combination and the sequencing around doing that. And maybe you want to use this upgrade, but then use a sort of spell event, which wants a different resource on top. It just gets really interesting looking for those kind of things. Then we have Magic's Obligation and Nemesis there, and these are super, super chill. Darkchild is the old style of Obligation, not like some of the X-Force heroes we've been getting recently, or some of even the X-Men, in the last wave. It's just one of those cards which says, hey, you can go Alter Ego, and if you exhaust, it's gone. An encounter card, which you just have to exhaust to get rid of, is very, very lenient, especially against, some of those harder villains. I'm always very happy to see this Obligation come up, if I'm honest. And even the other option here isn't that bad. Deal 1 damage to each character you control, discard this Obligation. Maybe an ally or 2 could be defeated, but a lot of the time they won't be. And if I don't have any allies out, if this comes up early potentially, or I've already, chump blocked with maybe an early ally that I've played, I'm just going to take 1 damage on my hero, and then this encounter card is gone. That is really good. That is fine, no problem. Then we've got the sort of the Nemesis minion here, Belasco. Hopefully I'm saying that right. 6 health, 1 attack, 1 scheme. Yeah, he's got quite a bit of health, but the scheme and attack stats aren't bad. Okay, he has Villainous. Force response here isn't bad at all. It just makes you discard a couple of cards. And yeah, it's fine. Magic can attack for 2, read up with Stepping Disc, attack for 2. Maybe attack for 2 with Colossus. Maybe you've got the Soul Sword down. Now you only need to basic attack twice. Maybe you've got Soul Strike. It's a basic attack and you play Soul Strike. She has multiple lines to defeat Belasco quite easily, so he's never too much of a problem. Then we've got the Nemesis side scheme here, Ruler of Limbo, and This thing is kind of pathetic, if I'm honest. The threat cannot be removed from scheme while Belasco is in play, so if for some reason you cannot manifest 6 damage, it could be a little issue, but generally, just free threat is very easy to find. You get rid of it, but it has this when revealed effect, which might seem bad. What happens is you have to find Limbo and attach it face down there. So if Limbo is in play, you lose it, and now it's face down under rule of Limbo out of play. And that kind of sucks, right? Except when you defeat it, it doesn't just get discarded. It doesn't just get put back in your hand. You know, some encounter card effects kind of do that. It actually gets put back into play under the owner's control. So if you don't even have Limbo out at this point, if you haven't found it, but your Nemesis, you know, has entered play, you just defeat the side scheme and congratulations, you've now got Limbo. Basically, Belasco has handed you Limbo when you didn't even have it in the first place. But what's even better as well, potentially, is you could use Limbo in the villain phase to put Magic Barrier or something on top of your deck, use Magic Barrier, then when the encounter card is revealed and, you know, your Nemesis comes out, whatever, Rule of Limbo is going to take Limbo because it's face down here, it's out of play, it's not exhausted, you don't have to worry about that. When it gets put back into play under your control, it's ready again. I'm pretty sure that is accurate, which means you could then exhaust it to put another card on top of your deck in the player phase, despite not having got to the point where you normally ready up all your supports and upgrades, because it's gone out of play entirely and then back into play, which is, you know, just really very, very good. So pretty chill side scheme here, very chill obligation, fairly chill Nemesis minion. Fine, not bad at all. Next up, I just want to talk about Domino very briefly, and this might seem a little bit random, but if you watched my previous video, you'll know where I'm coming from, where I did talk about the, you know, the evolution of heroes. Magik is the evolution of Domino, which is really curious because Domino only came out in the last expansion. There's always, you know, one male, one female hero typically in these boxes. Domino was a female one there. Magik is a female one here. It's really only been a few months. I find this quite strange, but fortunately, I do really enjoy Magik. So they're very different, but also the most similar heroes in the game in regards to each other. So Domino also plays with the top card of her deck. She can't see what it is, but she has multiple ways to swap a card there, which means you often do know what is there. So you have some of the same kind of decision-making process. She also benefits from certain resource types being on the top of her deck. Notably, she really cares about wilds, whereas Magik likes wilds because they kind of trigger everything. But if she's, you know, leaning more into aggression, she's going to like these physicals there for the Soul Sword and Soul Strike. But they both like wilds. They both play at the top of their deck. It's pretty close together. And I already mentioned before how Limbo's action is actually Domino's hero card action. Probability Field is an upgrade which boosts Domino's stats if she has the right resource icon on top of her deck. Although she, you know, she has to discard it. Domino's difference is she's all about discarding, whereas Magik just wants the card, you know, on the top of the deck sitting there. But still is very similar. Right place, right time. Again, it's an event which, if you have the right card on top of your deck and it discards it, it will give you a bonus. Just like Soul Strike, for example, if it's the right card on top of your deck, you'll get the extra bonus from that as well. And then Pip the Pug is a support, kind of reminiscent of Limbo, even if Limbo is, again, like Domino's ability. Pip the Pug has an action where you get to move a card from your discard pile to the top of your deck. So it's just a one-card support that lets you put something on top of your deck, just like what Magik has. They do play quite differently, but they also play in a similar way, and it's really interesting to compare them. I'll say for my money, I actually prefer Magik by quite a large margin. I think the way her events and, you know, upgrades are competing for different resources, and she is also more limited in the way she can move cards. You know, Domino has her action she begins with already. She has her alter ego action as well. She has Pip the Pug. She has Painted Lady, which can kind of interact with what you discard to move cards around. Domino just feels like once she's set up, she always has everything she needs at all times. Whereas Magik, I feel like you always have a different puzzle you're trying to solve. And Magik, I also think, though, is less reliant on having upgrades and supports. Domino is actually, you know, kind of in a slightly subtle way. I don't think people think about her like this a lot. She's kind of a build hero. Just a lot of upgrades and supports that she really enjoys getting into play because they're very, very powerful. And she doesn't need all of them in play to do well, but she definitely enjoys it when she can. Whereas I think Magik doesn't need much to be really, really strong from the get-go. I think Magik has a much stronger earlier game, whereas Domino maybe is, you know, better in the later game, which is an interesting distinction. And yeah, just thought this was interesting to talk about. Next, I want to talk about the aspect and sort of deck building side of Magik. So Magik has a problem like Domino, where she has a ton of basic cards that she really, really, really likes. And this can dominate deck building to quite an extreme degree sometimes, leaving you sometimes at, you know, maybe 7 to 9 cards you can actually really put in from the aspect, because these basic cards are just so good and you can put them in almost all of her decks and it will do really well. You know, it's less of a case of should I add this, and it's more of a case of why should I take this out of the deck? That's at least how I feel about it. There are just so many good ones. She's got the mutant trait in Alter Ego, so X Gene is phenomenal. She has a lot of good events and she can move them around, so you're always kind of going to be able to use it most turns. Sorcerer Supreme, you know, Magik has a 5-card hand size in hero form. Sorcerer Supreme, it's 6, but really with her own ability, it kind of makes it 7 because you get to look at the top card of your deck and you can play it. So you have a lot of very, very playable cards, a very big hand size generally with Magik, which is kind of silly. It's really strong, and it gets even better with these 3 copies of Spiritual Meditation. Action, draw 2 cards, choose and discard 1 from your hand. This is just really good. So you just ditch your worst card and now you've got 2 different cards. It's just digging deeper into your deck to find the right answers. And yeah, Spiritual Meditation I think is actually stronger for Mystics than Sorcerer Supreme, in all honesty. Yes, okay, I'd rather have Sorcerer Supreme in play than 3 Spiritual Meditations in my deck, but you don't have to pay for Spiritual Meditation, and it's going to help you find Sorcerer Supreme. It's going to help you find whatever you need for that situation. Just really, really good to have. I absolutely love Avengers Mansion on Magik because you want the right card on top of your deck to play or to trigger your events, and you know, or have your upgrades, you know, get the right resource there. Avengers Mansion is just a very easy way to move that top card of your deck along, or maybe a stepping disc, put something on top of your deck, you can then draw it into hand. If you already knew what, you know, what was beneath, you know, the card you've just drawn, because stepping disc puts the card on top of whatever's previously there, you can just line things up really nicely. It's just super, super convenient, and she can definitely afford it. I have never played her without Avengers Mansion. I've also, you know, always used Avengers Mansion on Domino. That is a lesson I learned there, and they both really, really appreciate it. Now, Cosmo got kind of nerfed in the recent rules update. Doesn't work with Doctor Strange's Invocation deck anymore by the official rules. But guess what? Cosmo still works with your deck. You can see the top card. Cosmo's Interrupts makes you name a card type, and if you name it correctly, he doesn't take consequential damage. What this means is Cosmo is now Magik's best friend, not Doctor Strange's, and what this means is Cosmo is just never ever taking damage and can, like Avengers Mansion and, you know, several other cards, can just help you cycle through your deck, get a better card on top of your deck, and it's hard not to include Cosmo. Just getting the 1 free attack or forwarding every turn isn't that important, but he can chump block in an emergency, and he just, like I say, helps move that deck on. That is quite a subtle benefit, but very powerful in all honesty. Legion is kind of in the same boat as Cosmo, probably even better than Cosmo. I absolutely love Legion. He's got 1 fort and 1 attack as well, and like Cosmo, he discards from the top of the deck, but you're not guessing what that card is. You're discarding it, seeing what the resource is, and you get a different bonus. It can be damage to an enemy with energy, it can be threat removal with mental resources. If it's a physical, Legion heals. And if he's at full health and you get a physical resource and he tries to heal, that kind of sucks, but otherwise, unless it's a wild, which he doesn't like, every other, you know, outcome is really good, particularly in multiplayer where you've got better places to put the damage or threat removal. And what I love about Legion, not really talking about Magik here, just Legion, it's just you can say attack for 1, pop a tough, then you discard, let's say, an energy, you can put that damage onto the minion now that the tough is removed, or the villain, whatever you're attacking. Really, really good. This is much better for Magik because Magik knows what's on top of her deck, so you can always get the perfect result for Legion that you're looking for. And, you know, you can just use them 3 times, get 9 threat removal. That's just insanely good. Keep him around, maybe find a physical for him, heal him up. He can just be with you the entire game, cycling through your deck, finding you what you want on top of your deck, just powering through any obstacle in front of you. It's really very powerful. Build support here, I've got mixed feelings on. I do really like it and you know, this is mainly to find Limbo, but because of Spiritual Meditation and, you know, Sorcerer Supreme and the way she can see the top card of her deck and, you know, Cosmo Legion, you can generally fly through your deck pretty quick. So you can generally find Limbo pretty quick anyway, or hey, maybe your nemesis will be kind enough to gift it to you. But still, Limbo is so good that build support is definitely a very strong consideration, especially if you're also running other supports like maybe X-Jet or Helicarrier or anything else, maybe some of the X-Men support cards. So it's good inclusion, but thanks to her 1 forwarding that she starts with and the ability to go through the deck quickly, not essential. Next up, we have even more basic cards, and Digging Deep and White Fox are cards I really, really like for Magik. If you played Domino, you'll understand this. If you know what's on top of your deck, or you can manipulate that, and then you have some ways to discard, let's say Cosmo and Legion here, you can get Digging Deep and White Fox extremely reliably. You just swap one on top with Limbo, or happen to find it there as you cycle through your deck quite a lot in one turn, sometimes in all honesty. And yeah, you'll just benefit from it. Alternatively, or maybe in combination, you can run the Parent All of Us because you're already sort of incentivized to run all these basic cards. And it's kind of interesting that there are a lot of really good basic cards for the X-Men, but because she's got so many cards she wants to take, you kind of have to choose to lean more into the X-Men stuff or more into kind of just the general basic cards that are really good for Magic. You cannot truly, in my opinion, have the best of both. You cannot have the full benefits of one and the full benefits of, let's say, the other. And it's kind of tricky because it's a downside, but at least it's a choice in that. But yeah, I generally either go for Digging Deep or Parent All of Us, not both of them, but you can do both of them and do pretty well. I'm not fully decided on how I like that yet. Magic is quite a complex character. Hope Summers is a really fun ally for her. If you're running an X-Men deck, guess what? Great. She'll trigger Utopia because when you play Hope Summers, she gains your trait from your identity, so that's really good. So she is basically registered as an X-Men instantly, which will, trigger Utopia. Even without Utopia, though, I really like Hope. Expensive, yes, but you can play her from the top of your deck. That's really convenient. After you play her from your hand, what happens, and I should say playing from the top of your deck kind of counts as from your hand. It says to play it as if it was in your hand. What happens is Hope Summers response triggers, and you get to search your deck for a superpower card and add it to your hand. Now, the superpower card that Magic has is Stepping Disc. So when I play Hope Summers, I basically get Stepping Disc. When I get Stepping Disc, I can have any of my other Magic events, which is really very powerful. So Hope Summers is a kind of a little bit of a favorite of mine for Magic. Won't make every deck, mainly because of deck space, but I really enjoy using her when I can. Next up, we have Stepford Cuckoos, which is a new card with this expansion, and I love this card. Now, I mainly would only use this in multiplayer for the most part. 2 to 4 player, I just throw this in basically any X-Men I've been playing so far. Really never regretted it on expert mode, especially against the hard villains. It's just phenomenal. Under Fire is basically a thing of the past. You can change out a treachery card for another encounter card, and yes, you could get something just as bad, but normally if you use it on the worst encounter cards in the deck, you are likely to get something not as bad. And generally, even if you've got something like advance, you're very, very unlikely to pull another advance. Yes, it can obviously happen, but it is a low chance. I do love Stepford Cuckoos, a really fun new support card. Did X-Men really need any more supports? No, but I find myself really enjoying this one. It really, really, more than all the other cards, lends itself to being a support card, and it helps other players because it doesn't matter if another player reveals that treachery card. You can use Stepford Cuckoos to replace it with something else. Doesn't matter if they're an X-Men or not, that, the other player. So yeah, you've got 3 charges for it, 3 uses for it. It's basically Spycraft with multiple uses. You could kind of compare it to Command Team versus Get Ready in terms of leadership cards to ready allies. This one has much more uses than Spycraft. It's more cost efficient. So as long as you're an X-Men, it's just better, and I think it's really, really good. Then we've got all the X-Men allies. Like I say, new character Triage, very good in general. They're always good for the decks. Nick Fury, drawing all those cards can be really good, help you find Limbo quicker, but also just move whatever the top card of your deck is to something else. Well, that's really good. And yeah, there's just so many good cards that Magic really, really wants. It's kind of insane. And this is just basic that we've talked about for a while now. So let's move on and let's actually do a bit of a plot twist here and go to the pool aspect. Now, I've heard a few people talking about pool being Magic's best aspect, and I've not seen much feedback on the new characters. I've kind of been trying to avoid it where the game was delayed in the UK, but people have been saying, yeah, pool is really good for Magic, and I agree it's really good for Magic. I do not think it's her best at all, but it is really fun, mainly because of the War upgrade. So the War upgrade means you discard a card from the encounter deck and you take damage equal to the icons on it, but then you get to discard a card from your deck, and since Limbo can help you set up that card, you could put one of the 6-cost events from Pool there, or even a 4-cost ally like Nick Fury there, and you get to do some big damage to an enemy, normally the villain, though you can use this to, just smite minions off the face of the board. It's very, very fun. I actually really, really enjoy using War, and I think Pool is actually one of the most fun aspects for Magic, which is really, really exciting to say, because a lot of people have not liked the Pool aspect, but Magic does it really extremely well. And of course, the triple resources, if you stay healthy, are really good. Hitting fact, there's a lot of really good cards for Pool. The challenge is trying to fit them in a deck when competing with all the really good basic cards. Similar problem with leadership. I can run an Uncanny X-Men deck, and it will do extremely well. But to make it do extremely well, I'll have to sacrifice a lot of basic cards to fit in a lot of X-Men characters, and that just comes at the cost of a lot of the really good things for Magik in general, with her kind of play with top card of deck revealed, kind of, interacting stuff. But nonetheless, Uncanny X-Men is one of the few things that can compete with the power of basic cards for Magik. And you can also run Danger Room Training decks for her. That's very good. If there's a 1-cost upgrade on top of my deck, like, Danger Room Training, I would just play that and throw that onto an ally. No questions asked. It's very good. You also have To Me My X-Men. We talked a bit about this in my preview sort of video review for Magik when she was first announced. Because she can play with the top card of her deck, you can put an ally there, an X-Men ally. So To Me My X-Men, which searches the top 5 cards of your deck for an X-Men ally, will have a 100% hit rate if you've lined things up. Extremely, extremely good. And of course, in leadership, we also have Summoning Spell, the Mystic, leadership card. It's really good because you just discard until you find an ally and you put it into play. So a 2-cost event can end up putting a 4 or 5-cost ally into play, which is basically as busted as it sounds. Now the problem will be having enough, spaces in your deck to put these expensive allies. So in some way, I do think Magik is the least good character, Mystic, for summoning spell in the game, but she's still extremely good for it. So, it is what it is. Leadership and Pool are both very, very good for Magik. No surprises on leadership. It's kind of good for everyone, but yeah, very, very good for Magik. Then we have Justice and Sudden Silence. Again, it's a Mystic spell for that aspect. Goes without saying, it's a really good threat removal. Discard cards from the top of your deck, just like Summoning Spell, I should say. So Digging Deep becomes really good with these as well. Wolfsbane is an amazing ally, free cost. The main thing we care about here is the response. After Wolfbane Force, you have to name a card type, a bit like Cosmo. Instead of not taking consequential damage, if you guess correctly, Wolfsbane draws you that card. Because you can see the top card of your deck, Wolfsbane has 100% accuracy, so you just always draw the card. It's very, very strong. I've built decks around Wolfsbane, actually using Honorary X-Men, so I can put on the next card we're looking at here, Mission Training. Now, I don't necessarily recommend that, but it is fun. But Mission Training in general, I definitely do recommend. Thanks to Spectral Meditation, thanks to Magik, being able to have Sorcerer Supreme and see that top card of a deck. You fly through your deck, you get allies down very consistently, you can pay for them very, very easily, you can get mission training onto them very, very easily, with or without Danger Room in play, and it's just extraordinarily efficient card, so it does really well. Justice, I would say, is my least favorite aspect for Magik. I think it's, really powerful, but in terms of fun, I think it has the least amount of sort of fun interactions of all the aspects with her. So that is that, but it's still incredibly strong. If you like Justice and you like Magik, they will still go together just fine. Then we have Protection, and we talked about how in the villain phase, if you can have the right card on top of your deck to be able to play in the villain phase, you can kind of get double value out of your hero ability. You can play a card from the top of your deck in the villain phase, and then the hero phase. So having defense events, which are primarily the cards you'll be playing in the villain phase, more of them, thanks to the aspect, is really, really good. Shield Spell, again, Mystic card, goes without saying, put that in your deck. Discard cards, goes well Digging Deep. But then we have some interesting choices, because we can run a kind of a classic unflappable, perfect defense, exhaust to defend deck, and then desperate defense, and cards like that become really very good for Magik. We can just run a kind of imperfect defense deck where we're still playing defense cards, but we're maybe not exhausting to defend. We don't care as much if we don't block the entirety of the damage. Cards like Sidestep and Subdue then become very, very good. And we can actually run an X-Men ally-based deck with Mutant Protectors, very similar, almost in reverse way to the To Me My X-Men card we just talked about. Rather than line up an ally on top of your deck, you can kind of line up Mutant Protectors on top of your deck instead to use that as well. And I would say maybe joint with Cyclops. She is the best user of Mutant Protectors, but I think Cyclops loses more by going to Protection, whereas Magik doesn't lose as much. It's actually a really, really powerful aspect for her. So she might kind of actually be the best user of Mutant Protectors in the game. Do I prefer it to Perfect Defense or Imperfect Defense? I'm not really sure I do, but I think it's a very, very fun option. It's pretty unique, honestly, because Mutant Protectors is not a good card for most characters in the game. So a lot of cool stuff in Protection. I would say playing Magik in Perfect Defense Protection reminded me of the first time I played Ghost Spider in Protection. It made Perfect Defense Protection one of my kind of least favorite archetypes, in all honesty. I don't like having to exhaust to defend whatsoever in Marvel Champions. I just don't. It makes it really fun. The kind of, sort of expanded hand size that Magik gets means that even though you can add, a fair few defense events into your deck, you generally never have too many in your hand, and you have lots of ammunition for Limbo to swap on top of your deck, and maybe even by chance find on top of your deck anyway, so you get that extra value from that hero ability that I've been talking about. So yeah, huge thumbs up for protection and magic. Then we have my favorite aspect for her, which is aggression. Magic attack is the Mystic Aggression card, it discards cards, etc, etc, really good. But now we have new ally Gold Balls who also discards cards from the top of your deck, which can, if you don't have the right card that you want to play on top of your deck, you can cycle that on. Maybe you find the right resource icon to trigger your upgrades, etc. Really very useful. Digging deep again, very, very good. Attack training, just like mission training, extraordinarily good with magic. She can just spew out allies all over the board, throw these attack training cards on them, maybe on gold balls, and it's just insanely efficient. Very, very good. Boot camp, of course, kind of goes in with that. Though you can do a general ally-based deck with magic. Doesn't have to rely on X-Men because, she can struggle to find all the kind of X-Men synergy cards, deck space for them. So yeah, really fun options here. Energy Spear might surprise you guys, but that is for Cosmo because he's a Guardian, and he is so good for her that giving him 2 more attack is often worth it. And yeah, if Cosmo's not in play, this is basically a dead card, but a bit like what I talked about with the defense events in Protection, you can kind of afford to have something in hand that you might not want to play in the hero phase, because you're effectively having a 6 hand size, maybe 7 with Sorcerer Supreme, and you can cycle your deck in efficient ways, so you're going to see a lot of playable cards that just having one that might not work. If you don't find the ally you want it for, not a big deal. But again, with Spiritual Meditation, even if you see Energy Spear before Cosmo, this card will come around again very, very quickly. The last card I want to talk about for this little bit is You'll Pay For That. There's another card I want to talk about from Aggression. Her best card in the game, I will say, but we'll get to that next. Back to You'll Pay For That, 1-cost event. And this is significant because it has a hero response that happens in the sort of villain phase. Meaning if you can put this on top of your deck or happen to find it there very luckily, you can again get, double value from your hero ability. You get to use it in the villain phase and hero phase. It does mean you have to take damage. This card removes threat equal to the amount of damage you took from an attack. So if you have Magic Barrier or, Colossus and you're playing those from the top of your deck and mitigating the damage you're taking that turn, then you're not playing You'll Pay For That at all. So there is some anti-synergy with her existing cards, which is the downside, but it is interesting enough as one of the only cards in the game outside Protection that you really want to play from the top of your deck with her, that I think it's worth mentioning, and I have enjoyed it when I've used it with Magic. Main issue, I would say, even more than the kind of anti-synergy of Magic Barrier and so on, is just deck space. But hands down, the absolute best card for Magic, in my opinion, from all the aspect and, basic cards, is Hulk. A Corsair ally, just 2 cost, not a big deal, except you can see the top card of your deck. So now that randomness that can cause him to discard himself or deal 1 damage across the board, maybe defeat, several allies from other players, knock off your tough or something. That's not a worry anymore because you can see when you've got a physical on top of your deck. And in fact, you have several ways to put a physical resource card on top of your deck. So Hulk has 5 hit points, 3 attack. You're always getting the bonus 2 damage from discarding a physical card. Basically, this is a 2-cost card that does 25 damage. But what's even more insane than that is that the damage is split up into 2 parts. So Hulk can attack 1 target, you discard a card, you can then deal that 2 damage to a different target. So it's insanely flexible. You can use Hulk to take out a minion and then deal damage to the villain, or vice versa, or hit the villain and use the 2 damage to take out a tough on a minion, so you can now attack them with your Soul Sword or maybe even Soul Strike or something. And it's just so good. A 2-cost card guaranteed to do 25 damage is unbelievable. Hulk is really, really good for Domino. Hulk is unbelievably broken for Magic. Magic doesn't have to use any of her actions, any of her limited stuff, to see what's on top of her deck. Quite often you will accidentally have the physical resource on top of your deck, especially if you built, an aggression deck, with this in mind. She doesn't have tons and tons of wilds like Domino, which are maybe not quite so good for Hulk. So yeah, this is just fantastic. Use Spiritual Meditation to find Hulk really quickly, and then you have basically won the game. As long as you, can just not lose to threat or damage taken, Hulk will basically provide all the damage you need in a solo game, and a huge chunk of it, even like, 2-player, very, very good in multiplayer. It's just insane. So then we have my, kind of final verdict, how I think she performs in those categories overall. I usually do this in my different videos. I have a sort of 5-star rating system for these different categories. And what you're looking at now is how I predicted she would be based on her first reveal. This is not my current opinion, but I got pretty close, I'll say. And all the changes I've really made have actually been because of the cards we had not had revealed at the time. So this is how I thought she was going to turn out, and this is how I actually think she is. Thanks to those nice, soul strikes, I think her damage got a nice little bit of a boost. It is a good attack card, and I did, like I say, underestimate how Stepping Disc can just take, say, your attack card soul strike from the discard pile, put it on top of your deck, and you can get even more damage whenever you need it. Very, very strong. The same way you can do that for forwarding with Exorcism. I almost put this as 4 stars as well. Maybe I should have. It's definitely, it's basically 3.5. It's very, very good. If you haven't found, your crown, if you haven't found a copy of Exorcism yet, your early game forwarding can be quite underwhelming in all honesty still. So this is what holds it back, but after that, once you've got something in your discard pile or your crown in play, you're pretty much set. Survivability is really good. These stuns from Soul Strike come in really useful here. If you need more stuns, don't worry, Stepping Disc will just put Soul Strike back on top of your deck, as I keep saying. It's so good. Her economy, I almost wanted to give her a 6th bonus star. I've actually done this a little bit down below. Purple star is basically an extra one. If you've watched my other videos, you'll probably know about that. Almost did that for economy. Maybe I should have. She can afford a lot of cards. Maybe not as many as, let's say, Captain Marvel, but still far more than the average hero. It's very, very strong. Even Spiritual Meditation and, the way she has kind of, that pseudo extra hand size, going to work you through your deck quickly. You're going to find your double resources faster and, more often as you cycle the deck. It's good. It's really, really good. Now, thanks to all these stuns on, Exorcism, on Soul Strike, her control is really powerful. You can just lock down the villain, stop seeing, many boost cards at all, in all honesty, especially in a solo game. It's very, very good. So, yeah, very, very powerful. Yeah, she's got less confuses and stuns than certain other characters, but Stepping Disc is here to the rescue to recycle your, semi-limited. You got 4 of them. It's quite a good amount. Events with the stuns and confuses back onto top of your deck. Very good. Speed of setup, again, is really good. Now, she does have a different upgrade for each of her stats, a bit like Quicksilver, and he is kind of known for being a slow setup character, but the advantage of Magik is, again, you just fly through your deck, but also, most decks, I think, have an ideal upgrade they want in play. If you're an aggression, you might really favor either the threat removal, upgrade to keep that in check while your events and allies are just smashing out incredible amounts of damage. Morph Smash, or maybe your aggression in multiplayer, you might want to focus on the Soul Sword because your job on the team is to do damage. So you're looking for maybe one of those upgrades, and you're looking for Limbo, which again can be found with your Nemesis. Just you'll find those cards quickly. You only need those 1 or 2 in play, and you're basically good to go. Any extra stuff, great. Reliability, I've given not just an extra star from the prediction sort of preview to now, I've given it a 6th bonus star. I don't just think Magik always has really good games. I could play 10 games in a row. I'd think all of them go really well. I don't have bad turns with Magik. I don't ever seem to really have bad turns with Magik. Just that extra hand size, the ability to cycle through that, the ability to move cards around. I don't always have the absolute perfect turn like I maybe could with Domino once she is set up, but every turn will be very, very strong and very, very fun, which means, yeah. The fun doesn't really factor into the reliability here. I'm just throwing that out as a commentary, but she is just ultra, ultra reliable. And that is one of the kind of subtle strengths to her that I don't think is taken into account too much when people think, oh, how strong she is. Although, again, I've not really seen much of people saying that, just little snippets here and there. But she is ultra, ultra consistent, which I like a lot. I'm very much a player who enjoys consistency. Card value I've left at 5. That's very, very high. All her cards are very good. Tempted to give it 6 stars, but her events and even her upgrades, because of the nature of having to have the right resource icon on top of your deck, they're not 100% reliant. There will be, plenty of times where you won't have the right resource icon on top of your deck for them, which is a small detriment to their value. And you might say reliability, but they are still reliable in that even without the right thing on top of your deck, you're still getting good damage or good threat removal, or you've got that steady, even if you're not getting the bonus to your forwarding from her crown. So really just great value, reliability, just great everything pretty much, yeah. So she's very, very strong. In terms of ease of play, this isn't so much, measuring her strength, but about more of the experience playing her. She is quite difficult to play. Domino, I think you can get away with not making all the perfect decisions and still doing very well with her. Magik, I mean, you can still do that as well, but I think she loses more. I think because you're trying to line up multiple things with multiple different resource types with maybe less ways to move them, she is actually maybe in some ways harder than Domino. Domino has more decisions to make and generally has longer turns, in my opinion, but Magik's fewer decisions are much more impactful. The sequencing is much, more important. So I think she's actually a pretty difficult hero, maybe in the top 2 or 3, maybe 4 most difficult heroes to play in the entire game. In terms of variety, I've kept it the same. 2, you can play her in every aspect, which is really fun, and a couple of those aspects do have different builds for her, but they are limited by the sheer amount of basic cards that are incredibly, unbelievably good for her. So your real deck building, I don't know, real estate, space to add in new cards and that is quite limited, unless you're going to remove some of those really good cards for her, in which case you're kind of artificially weakening the deck for the sake of, having different cards in the deck, which you can kind of really do on any hero. So yeah, variety kind of scores a little bit low for me, but the fun is a very high. I almost gave this 5 stars. Maybe I will one day. I think she's incredibly fun to play. Probably in my top 5 X-Men. I mean, we've got 10 now, so she's in the top half of my X-Men characters. If you've watched my favorite heroes video, I absolutely love the X-Men heroes, so this is a very, very strong showing. She's really, really good. Now, how good is she in comparison to the other heroes? Because at the start of the video, I asked the question, is she the best Mystic in the game now? And in terms of pure power, is absolutely not the case. Doctor Strange is the king, and he is not being usurped anytime soon. But she is very strong. Now, with the Mystic and X-Men trait and, the power of the cards we had seen in the preview, I had tipped her to be a top 5 hero in terms of power, and I'm not 100% sure that is the case. I definitely would not be surprised if I ended up thinking that, in a few months' time or something. Right now, however, I'm only convinced she's a top 10 hero, and this is still incredibly powerful. Thanks to the X-Force wave we just had with Next Evolution, there are a lot of new extraordinarily powerful heroes in the game. The top 10, I think, has had a big shake-up. I've actually been working on a new version of my tier list, honestly, for months now, but I've been working really hard at it lately. Still might not come out for months. I have, like over 40 games still lined up I want to do, and that is just like the minimum amount before I make any kind of, verdicts on that. But I struggle to not see Magik making the top 10 of it. At worst, top 15. She is incredibly powerful. Is she stronger than Scarlet Witch? It's hard to say because Hexbot is so incredibly busted. Um, and Scarlet Witch has the advantage of molecular decay. What Magik kind of lacks is a big card to deal big damage to finish off games, particularly in solo, but it's not quite as assured as molecular decay. Nonetheless, Magik's strong. Magik is really strong and, more importantly, really fun. So this is a huge win for the designers, in my opinion, and a huge win for us players. I've really enjoyed Magik. What a fantastic character. And now I'm just really excited to talk about Bishop. If you've enjoyed this video, make sure to hit that like button, cast a spell on the subscribe button. Don't forget to turn on notifications if you can, and leave a comment. Let me know what you think of Magik. Have I overrated her, underrated her, missed anything important? Let me know. Thanks again. This has been fun. I hope you guys are enjoying Age of Apocalypse, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.